It began with a headache that wouldn't leave. Emily used to laugh at small things, a stupid meme, my clumsy coffee spills, the way our dog barked at mail trucks. But lately, she'd just sit in silence, fingers pressing her temples like the world had become too loud. At first, I thought it was stress. She worked long hours at the architecture firm, staring at screens, skipping meals. I'd rub her shoulders at night, tell her to breathe, offer to cook. She'd smile faintly and whisper, "It's fine, Daniel. It's just a headache." But just turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Then came the excuses. We stopped going out. She said the lights in restaurants made her dizzy. We stopped watching movies because the sound pounded in her skull. Eventually, even intimacy faded. She'd flinch when I touched her forehead or brushed her hair behind her ear. I told myself not to take it personally. People go through things. Love meant patience, right? Still, there was a distance I couldn't name. Something colder than pain. One Sunday morning, she mentioned a new neurologist, Dr. Ryan Cole. "He's supposed to be the best," she said, eyes fixed on her coffee mug. "He thinks it might be neurological tension." The way she said his name had a strange softness, almost relief. I didn't question it. I wanted her better, no matter what it took. She started seeing him twice a week, sometimes 3. Each time she came home, her skin had that faint glow people get after a good run, tired but alive. I asked if the treatments helped. She nodded too quickly. "He's running some advanced imaging," she said. "It's technical, hard to explain." I didn't push. I trusted her. That's what marriage is supposed to mean. Trust that doesn't need proof. Then small oddities began stacking up. Her hospital parking receipts didn't match her appointment times. Once, she came home wearing a faint trace of cologne that wasn't mine. Sharp, clinical, too refined to be random. Another night, I found a text preview on her smartwatch while she was in the shower. It wasn't explicit, but it wasn't right either. "Late tonight. Same room. Keep the lights dim." I stared at it, heart pounding, but before I could open the message, she stepped out, towel around her hair, humming softly. I dropped the watch like it burned. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe I was paranoid. The next day, I got a call from St. Joseph Medical Center, the hospital where she saw Dr. Cole. Their MRI imaging server had crashed, and they needed immediate technical assistance. I'd been consulting there for years, setting up system backups and camera protocols. They trusted me. As I drove through the rain toward the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was pulling some cruel string, leading me there for a reason. When I arrived, the night shift was thin. The fluorescent lights hummed above empty halls, the air thick with antiseptic and silence. I signed in at the IT desk, swiped my badge, and headed to the server room. Half an hour later, the system rebooted. Data logs scrolled across my screen. I was about to close the backup directory when I noticed something strange, a string of unauthorized access entries. Room 3A, MRI Suite, 10:43 p.m. Dr. R. Cole/patient, Emily Reed. The timestamp made no sense. MRI sessions weren't scheduled that late. I scrolled further. 3 similar entries, all at nearly the same time, all marked private. Curiosity overrode hesitation. I opened the most recent one. The monitor filled with grayscale footage, grainy but clear enough. The room was dim, the hum of the machine constant. Emily stood near the scanner, in a hospital gown, hair loose, laughing, a laugh I hadn't heard in months. Ryan Cole stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. The moment lingered too long, too soft for professionalism. I felt my pulse thud in my throat. My hand trembled over the pause key. The lights in the room flickered, the machine's reflection rippling across them as they leaned closer, silhouettes framed in that sterile glow. I stopped the playback before the image could confirm what I already knew. I just sat there in the empty server room, surrounded by humming machines and cold air. The cursor blinked like it was waiting for me to breathe. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, something in me quietly broke. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the dim reflection of the MRI machine, that cold, metallic halo framing their shapes. I tried to convince myself it was innocent, that maybe he was comforting her, that the angle made it look worse than it was. But my mind kept replaying the details. Her laughter, his hand, the intimacy of silence between them. The next morning, I acted normal. I made coffee. She walked into the kitchen wearing one of my shirts, the one she used to steal when we were first dating. She smiled faintly, but there was a distance behind it, the kind that can't be fixed with caffeine or small talk. "You're quiet today," she said, tilting her head. "Just tired," I replied. "Work's been heavy." She nodded, unconcerned. Maybe relieved I wasn't asking questions. Maybe confident her performance was flawless. When she left for another session that afternoon, I drove straight to the hospital again. No appointment, no call. Just me and my access badge. I told the front desk I was running maintenance checks. No one questioned it. Hospitals always trust the quiet ones who make the machines run. The MRI server sat in a small glass room at the end of Radiology Hall B. Rows of monitors blinked softly in the dark. I connected my drive and began pulling archived footage. There were dozens of logs under Dr. Cole's credentials, some routine, some private. I copied all of them, a month's worth of digital ghosts. The cursor blinked as gigabytes of their secrets filled my hard drive. Each progress bar felt like a slow heartbeat. When I got home, she was already there. Candlelight flickered in the dining room, plates set neatly, music playing low, old jazz, the kind she used to love. "What's all this?" I asked, forcing a smile. She shrugged. "I just wanted us to have dinner. Like before." Her hair fell over one shoulder, her eyes soft but guarded. For a moment, I almost believed her. The woman I married was still somewhere in there. But as she poured wine, I saw it. A faint red mark on her neck, half hidden beneath her collar. I stared too long. She noticed. "What?" she asked lightly, touching her throat. "Nothing," I said. "Just glad you're feeling better lately." Her smile faltered for a second, barely noticeable, but it was there. That tiny flicker of guilt. Or maybe fear. After dinner, I excused myself to finish a report. Instead, I locked my office door and opened the footage. The first few files were normal, patients entering, leaving, the hum of machines. Then came another late-night entry. Same timestamp pattern. Same faces. This time, their movements were slower, familiar. A hand on her shoulder. A smile she never gave me anymore. The way she leaned toward him as if gravity itself pulled her there. My stomach twisted, a mix of nausea and disbelief. I minimized the screen, staring at my reflection on the black monitor. Pale, shaking, not the man I used to be. That night, I didn't confront her. I didn't yell, didn't demand answers. Instead, I printed still frames from the footage, small, grainy, time-stamped. I placed them inside an envelope, sealed it, and hid it in my desk drawer. Evidence. Proof. Reality I could touch. But I wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. Over the next week, I started noticing more signs. She'd come home later, smelling faintly of antiseptic and cologne. Her phone buzzed during dinner, and she'd excuse herself to check on a client. Once, I passed her laptop and saw a folder labeled medical forms. I clicked it when she wasn't around. Empty. Just the icon sitting there, mocking me. And still, I said nothing. I waited. I watched. Because something inside me had shifted. Not rage, not sorrow. Something colder. A quiet calculation. I began studying Dr. Cole's online schedule, his hospital credentials, his research conferences. He was admired, polished, respected, with that kind of charm that made people forget he was human. I thought about what would happen if someone showed the hospital board his after-hours consultations. How fast a man's empire could crumble when truth slipped into daylight. But before any revenge, I needed more than footage. I needed context. I needed to know why. The next time she mentioned her appointment, I told her I'd pick her up after. She hesitated, just a fraction, then smiled too quickly. Sure, that'd be nice. At 9 p.m., I parked outside St. Joseph, watching the glass doors from across the lot. She hadn't texted. The parking lot was half empty, rain coating everything in dull reflections. Then, through the shimmering light, I saw her. Emily stepped out of the elevator, not alone. Dr. Cole followed, carrying her bag, their shoulders brushing. They walked side by side toward the MRI wing, unaware that the only person who truly knew that room's secrets was already waiting for them in the dark. I didn't follow them that night. I just watched the door close. And for the first time in my life, I understood what silence could do, how it could sharpen into something deadly. I told myself I would only watch enough to understand. That promise lasted 9 seconds. By the 10th, I'd paused the video and leaned closer to the screen, noticing details I'd ignored the first night. How Emily's shoulders relaxed the moment she stepped past the threshold, how Dr. Cole reached for the dimmer without looking, how they both seemed to know exactly where the light should fall. The choreography wasn't improvised. It was practiced. I started cataloging. Timestamp. Door swipe ID. Badge pings from the elevator. The whirring lull of the MRI magnet settling in standby. On the third replay, I caught something that hadn't registered: Emily's hands. She had always been precise with them, tying her hair, measuring flour, pinning blueprints to corkboard. In the footage, those same hands trembled at first, then didn't. Habit replaced hesitation. I minimized the window, swallowed hard, maximized it again. My reflection hovered on the black bezel, a man trying to turn pain into a spreadsheet. It was easier to be a technician than a husband. The technician could measure. The husband could only ache. The next evening, I returned to the hospital with a toolbox that had nothing to do with wrenches. I configured a silent audit, a shadow account with read-only access to radiology's camera matrix, mirrored to an encrypted partition they'd never notice unless they knew exactly where to look. I adjusted the motion thresholds in room 3A so the feed wouldn't time out when the machine idled. Then I placed a tiny contact mic in the cable run beneath the console. Legal? Probably not. Necessary? Absolutely. I told myself it was for context. Truth, like light, needs an angle. At home, I tried to act intact. Emily cooked pasta and asked about my day in that careful tone people use when they're checking a door for drafts. Her hair was swept into a loose knot. A single strand kept slipping, grazing her collarbone when she reached for the pepper. She looked beautiful in the way old photos look beautiful, familiar, out of reach. When she leaned past me to grab plates, warmth brushed my sleeve. The memory of her moving toward me used to be effortless. Now, every inch felt measured with a ruler I hadn't agreed to. I wanted to ask her why she laughed in that room, but not at our table. I wanted to ask what the dimmer switch gave her that I didn't. Instead, I complimented the sauce and poured more wine. She smiled politely, then drifted toward her laptop, the lamplight changing the color of her eyes. The screen lit her face as if it knew secrets I didn't. After midnight, alone in my office, I opened the newest capture. The contact mic had done its job. The room's hum was deeper than I'd remembered, almost oceanic. Beneath it, a low exchange, murmurs I couldn't fully make out, a soft hitch of breath, the faint click of a ring tapping metal. That ring tap struck something inside me. I remembered the day I gave it to her, how she curled her fingers around mine like a vow had a temperature. I paused, closed my eyes, and tried to breathe slower. Every frame was a needle. Every second added another stitch I didn't ask for. If I was going to do more than drown, I needed a plan that would float. I started mapping a timeline on the whiteboard. Dates of Emily's supposed treatment, Dr. Cole's lecture schedule, staffing patterns after hours. I layered in mundane details, parking payments, janitorial routes, the radiology admin who always microwaved soup at 10:20. The map looked like an electrical diagram of a failing heart. 2 days later, I tested a theory. I texted Emily during her appointment, heading past St. Joseph. Want a ride home? 10 minutes passed. Sorry, already calling a car. My head hurts. I watched, from the mirrored feed, as she read the message in the hallway with a smile that didn't match the words. Dr. Cole leaned toward her like a secret. She pocketed the phone and followed him back into the room. I rewound, watched, rewound again. The motion became mechanical in me too. There are patterns a mind refuses to unsee once it has seen them. In the quiet that followed, I realized I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. This wasn't suspicion. It was surveillance. It was also survival. I began collecting pieces that courts and boards respect. Time-sync door logs, the off-hours code he used to disable part of the panel, the mismatch between build CPT codes and actual scan durations. I drafted a report template with no names attached, just data and conclusions. It read like a case study in ethics, or the lack of it. But anger alone would make me clumsy. I needed something cleaner. Something that would not only reveal, but resonate. That's when I remembered the hospital's annual gala, the Medical Innovation Awards. I'd staffed the A/V once, years back. The format hadn't changed, a carefully edited montage of the honorees' achievements, applause, a speech, more applause. The whole night was built on what people saw on a screen. If a screen could crown him, a screen could end him. I sat back, letting the idea settle. Not a smear. A mirror. Let the hospital witness what the hospital had hosted. Let the room that made images become an image. Still, there was the problem of Emily. I wasn't ready to confront, and I wasn't ready to forgive. Between those two cliffs stretched a tightrope made of routine. Mornings became a choreography of gentle distance. I made her coffee. She thanked me softly. We talked about weather and deadlines as if small clouds could shade larger storms. At night, when she brushed past me in the hallway, the small electricity of proximity made me ache with memory. The human body betrays its owner in countless ways. Mine remembered when my mind wished it wouldn't. On a Thursday, she reached for my hand as we crossed the living room. Her fingers paused, barely resting on my knuckles, then withdrew. I looked up. She was watching me like a diver judges the water, measuring depth, danger, and whether the surface would break her fall. I didn't speak. She didn't either. Later, in the office glow, I cued another file. They moved less cautiously now, as if routine had dulled fear. He touched the small of her back in that unthinking way familiarity invents. She tilted her chin up, eyes half closed, and for a split second the camera caught her face in perfect focus. Want and resignation occupying the same square inch. That expression lodged under my ribs like a shard. I closed the window and stared at the blank desktop until my reflection came into view again. A technician handles signals, a husband handles silence. I had become both. Neither felt like enough. When the progress bar finished copying the week's captures to the encrypted drive, I labeled the folder with a single word, proof. Then I added another, purpose. One without the other was just a wound. I shut down the monitor. In the dark glass, I could almost believe I was whole. In the morning, I would begin stitching the plan to the place where it would draw blood, the gala. But before strategy, sleep. Or something like it. On the way to bed, I paused at the doorway to our room. Emily slept on her side, one hand under her cheek, the ring faintly catching moonlight through the curtains. Outside, sirens threaded the air and faded. Inside, a quieter alarm kept ringing. I stood there longer than I should have, then lay down carefully, leaving a deliberate space between us. She shifted toward the warmth without waking, her breath evening out as if trust were muscle memory. I stared at the ceiling and counted the seconds until dawn. Morning blurred into routine. Emily's footsteps, the coffee maker, the sigh when she scrolled through her phone. Every sound had become data in my head, something to catalog, to decode. She kissed my cheek before leaving. Light, practiced, almost ceremonial. I waited until the door shut, then opened my laptop. The hospital feed came online with a soft click. Room 3A appeared, empty, still humming from overnight calibration. I'd left my silent audit running. The logs pulsed at the corner of the screen like a second heartbeat. For 2 days I had gathered nothing but sterile stillness. Today, movement. At 6:42 p.m., Dr. Cole's badge pinged the reader. 8 minutes later, Emily arrived. She'd told me she was meeting a friend for dinner. My throat tightened as they disappeared beyond the glass. No words, only gestures. Her hair loosened, his hand adjusting the dimmer again. I muted the feed before the static began to sound like breathing. I saved the file and shut the laptop, but silence has a weight once it learns your name. It followed me to the kitchen, to the shower, to bed. I stared at the ceiling and heard the faint digital hum of that room inside my skull. The next day, I took a personal call from the hospital's operations manager. They were planning the annual Medical Innovation Gala and needed tech support for the presentation system. It was almost funny. The same screens that would celebrate Dr. Cole's brilliance could, with a single swap of files, become his undoing. I said yes before the thought finished forming. That night, I began crafting a copy of the hospital's video template. Title slide, logo fade, background track. In place of the usual montage, I inserted a still frame from the feed, 2 blurred silhouettes beneath the MRI arc. Not explicit, not even identifiable, just enough to raise questions. Then I layered the date and timestamp across the corner in institutional blue. Proof wrapped in professionalism. But revenge is a slow teacher. Every time I watched the edit, part of me trembled, not with triumph, but with something close to mourning. I remembered the first house Emily and I toured, how she'd traced the door frames with her fingertips and said, "This feels like a beginning." Now, every plan I made felt like an ending disguised as order. Friday came. She wore a new perfume, floral with a trace of something metallic. When she leaned to tie her shoes, light touched the faint bruise beneath her jaw. I forced my voice steady. Working late again? She hesitated just long enough to be noticed. Yeah, deadlines. You know. I nodded. Inside, something cold clicked into place. After she left, I opened the feed again. Tonight, no sound. Just the image of Dr. Cole alone in the MRI room, straightening his tie, checking his phone. A ritual before performance. He looked less like a doctor than an actor reviewing lines. I watched him leave and wondered whether guilt had ever visited him, even briefly. Later, I walked through the rain to the small park near our house. It was almost empty except for a couple under a lamp post, laughing quietly, unaware of me. I envied their ignorance. Revenge steals that from you first. It teaches you to see too much. When I returned, Emily was asleep on the couch. Her phone rested on her stomach, screen glowing faintly. For a moment, I thought of picking it up, of finding confirmation in plain words instead of pixels. Then I realized I didn't need it. I already knew more than truth could offer. I turned off the lamp. The darkness between us was complete, but it wasn't empty. It was charged, alive with the quiet electricity of everything unsaid. Somewhere in the house, the external drive hummed, archiving her secrets alongside mine. Tomorrow I would finalize the gala sequence. Tomorrow I would print 2 letters, one anonymous for the hospital board, one addressed only to her. Both would arrive the same morning. As I stood in the doorway watching her sleep, I felt the strangest calm. Not peace. Peace needs forgiveness, but a kind of mechanical certainty, the calm of circuits closing exactly as designed. The same calm I'd felt years ago when I first installed those cameras, believing they were just safety features. Now they were something else entirely, instruments of revelation. I whispered into the quiet, barely louder than breath. You should have told me the truth. She stirred, eyes fluttering for an instant, then settled again. I turned away before she could see mine. In the mirror by the hall, my reflection looked almost composed, as if this version of me had been waiting all along. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Inside, I powered down every light except one small lamp on my desk. Its glow spilled across the envelope marked proof. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow the light finally turns on. Morning came too clean. The world outside our window glowed with that washed-out calm that always follows a storm, the kind that pretends nothing ever happened. Emily stood at the sink, sunlight sliding across her hair like a secret. She was humming, faint, tuneless, the way people do when they're thinking about something else. For a second, I wanted to believe this was any other morning. But the envelope on my desk said otherwise. Inside it was the letter I'd drafted in the sleepless hours before dawn. A confession written not to be read, only to exist. It wasn't rage, it was anatomy. Every line dissected what we'd become, each sentence a small autopsy of trust. You built your world around a lie, I wrote, and I built mine around the belief that you wouldn't. I left the envelope sealed. Not for her, for me. It was the weight of paper that kept me steady. She noticed me watching. You okay? She asked, voice soft, rehearsed. Fine, I said. Big day at work. She nodded, unaware of how close that was to the truth. By noon I was back at St. Joseph Medical Center. The gala was 3 days away, and the operations team buzzed around the auditorium setting up projection rigs and lighting. The same room where donors would soon applaud excellence in medical ethics. I almost laughed. I connected my laptop, running tests, checking sync times. My version of the presentation, the one carrying the footage, sat inside a folder disguised as Ava_reference_backup. I renamed the real slideshow main, PPTX, and pointed the system to the decoy. When the MC pressed play, the file switch would happen invisibly. 5 seconds of latency, 1 lifetime of exposure. Still, doubt followed me like static. What if I was wrong? What if she'd been manipulated, pressured, coerced? I tried to imagine Dr. Cole's hand guiding hers, his words dripping with professional concern, his authority cloaking everything in false safety. It almost made me pity her, until I remembered her laughter, the way she had leaned in, the unmistakable ease of consent. In revenge, pity is poison. That evening, she texted, home late again. Don't wait up. Migraine's back. Migraine. The word had become a code neither of us bothered to translate. I stayed in the office, lights off, watching the feed. At 9:11 p.m., The camera caught her reflection in the MRI glass. Hair tied up, hospital badge crooked on her chest. Dr. Cole entered seconds later, their bodies fitting together with quiet precision, like choreography repeated too many times. He brushed his thumb along her jaw, and she smiled. That same small, knowing curve she used to save for me. Something inside me turned to glass. I couldn't break, couldn't bend, just reflected everything back. I exported the clip, trimmed it to 10 seconds, enough for recognition but not scandal. The rest I archived, encrypted, hidden under layers of code that only I could unravel. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about symmetry. The next morning, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She looked tired, not guilty, just hollow. I poured coffee, the smell cutting through the silence. Rough night? I asked. She didn't look up. Yeah, couldn't sleep. Neither could I, but for different reasons. Before leaving for work, she kissed my cheek. It was mechanical, but her hand lingered a heartbeat too long on my shoulder. Maybe habit, maybe doubt. Maybe a part of her sense that something beneath our floorboards was shifting. After she left, I opened the letter again. I almost added one line. I don't hate you. I just need the truth to mean something again. But truth had already been traded for comfort, and comfort was a currency we'd both overspent. That afternoon, I met with the hospital's communications director, a brisk woman named Lillian who handled all things public. Just make sure the visuals are polished, she said, tapping her tablet. The donors love a good story. A good story. I nodded. Oh, they get one. I left the meeting and walked the long corridor past the radiology wing. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and static. Through the window, I saw Dr. Cole speaking with a nurse, his posture perfect, expression controlled. If guilt had a face, it wasn't his. I wondered if Emily had fallen for that calm, that clinical confidence. Maybe that's what drew her, not love, but certainty. The kind of certainty I'd once given her before I learned how fragile it was. As I turned to leave, a hand touched my arm. Megan Cole. I recognized her from the staff directory photo, his wife. Sharp eyes, calm voice. You're Daniel Reed, right? My pulse jumped. Yes. Why? She smiled faintly, as if the answer didn't matter. We should talk. I think we have something in common. Her tone was steady, deliberate. She didn't look hurt. She looked prepared. We met later that evening in a small cafe across from the hospital. Megan slid a flash drive across the table. No words, just motion. You're not the only one who's been watching, she said. He's been lying to both of us for months. The drive sat between us like an artifact. Proof meeting proof. I didn't touch it yet. What do you want? I asked. Not money. Not pity. Just balance. Her eyes didn't blink. Whatever you're planning, I'll help. She stood, left her coffee untouched, and walked out into the drizzle. The flash drive glimmered under the dim cafe light. I picked it up, weighing it in my palm. It felt heavier than its size should allow, like guilt, compressed. That night, as Emily slept beside me, I slid the drive into my computer. The folders inside were neatly labeled. Recordings, invoices, personal. The first video opened with Dr. Cole at home, laughing with someone off camera. Not Emily, another woman. Another secret. My stomach twisted, not from surprise, but from the realization that I wasn't watching a triangle anymore. I was watching a web. For the first time since it began, I smiled. Not because I was free of pain, but because I finally understood it had a purpose. The gala was in 2 days. And now, I wasn't alone. Megan didn't text. She sent calendar invites with clean titles and 15-minute buffers, like strategy could sterilize hurt. We met in public places with loud air conditioners, a cafe, a hotel lobby, a library corner that smelled like old paper and lemons. She spoke in measured sentences, eyes steady, wedding band turning once, then stopping. I recognized that gesture. It was the body's way of admitting what the mouth refused to say. We compared notes like auditors. Her folders were disciplined. Card statements that lined up perfectly with conference nights, screenshots of car share drop-offs at the hospital after hours, a photo of Ryan leaving the MRI wing with his white coat folded over his arm and his tie in his pocket. She had audio, too, muffled, domestic, the clink of glasses, his easy laugh. Not Emily. Someone else. A life built on parallel hallways. Why give this to me? I asked. Because he trusts applause, she said. And you know where the speakers plug in. It was not warmth. It was alignment. The kind of alliance that happens when two injuries discover they make a perfect hinge. At home, the quiet between Emily and me had evolved from avoidance into choreography. She'd reach past me in the kitchen, her sleeve brushing my wrist. A smooth current of nearness that ignited nerves I wished were asleep. Once, as we stood at the sink, our shoulders grazed. She leaned in almost imperceptibly, then changed course, the distance reasserting itself like gravity. I could smell her shampoo, citrus, clean, something bright cutting through a dull room. The ache that followed wasn't only jealousy. It was muscle memory, the body remembering shelter. I opened my laptop after she went to bed. The gala deck lay ready, its bones disguised as corporate celebration. I refined the timing. The title slide would hold for 4 seconds, the hospital logo for 3, the black transition for 1, long enough for the eye to expect the standard montage. Then the cut, the MRI room in monochrome, timestamp pinned in the upper corner, silhouettes unmistakably intimate, yet not graphic, framed by the halo of the machine. I added a short caption in clinical font. After hours session, 22:43. No accusations. Just context. Megan and I tested the sequence in a borrowed conference room. The projector hummed to life, dust motes swirling through the cone of light. When the image arrived, quiet, undeniable, she didn't flinch. Trim it 2 seconds earlier, she said. Let the audio pick up that door click. It sounds like a verdict. We tuned the levels until the room itself felt complicit. Still, a question gnawed at me. What if this burns you too? I asked. Your name is attached to his. Publicly. Then I become a witness instead of a prop, she said. I can live with that. On the third night of planning, Emily came into my office unannounced. I alt-tabbed to a spreadsheet so fast the keys stung my fingers. She leaned against the doorframe, hair loose, eyes tired. You've been working late lately, she said. The tone tried for lightness and missed. So have you, I said, softer than I intended. A pause. Daniel, are we okay? It was the cruelest question, because an honest answer would cut both of us. She stepped closer, and the room seemed to narrow around her. For a heartbeat, the space between us felt charged, the way the air tightens before rain. She reached up as if to fix my collar, an old habit, then let her hand fall. I saw the glint of her ring and felt, absurdly, protective of the metal. We will be, I said, just not yet. She nodded, blinking back whatever threatened to rise, and left the door half open behind her. I stared at the gap as though it were a clock. The next day, I slipped into the auditorium under the pretense of testing a new switcher. The A/V rack was a nest of labeled cables. I knew it like anatomy. I programmed a hotkey that would swap the gala slideshow for my version with a single press, then buried the file 3 directories deep under vendor drivers. I taped a small note inside the rack, do not power cycle, so no well-meaning tech would reset my work. I walked the seating rows, memorizing sight lines. From the podium, the screen looked monumental, almost religious. I imagined the donors, the board, the press. I imagined Ryan's practice smile faltering, then failing. I imagined Emily in that moment, the room's breath turning toward her. My chest tightened. Justice and cruelty sometimes wear the same suit. Intention is the only difference, and intention is invisible. That evening, Megan sent a final file. A still of Ryan's car parked in the physician lot at 11:07 p.m. The same night one of my clips had recorded motion in room 3A. Redundancy, she wrote. In case the board asks for external corroboration. Redundancy. I recognized the thought. I had built an entire marriage on the assumption that feelings would back up facts. When facts failed, feelings kept running. Now it was reversed. The facts were brutal. The feeling that remained was a strange tenderness toward the life we had meant to live, toward the version of us that once seemed inevitable. On the eve of the gala, Emily stood in the bedroom mirror fixing an earring. We were going together. I had framed it as work, and she, perhaps out of habit, had agreed. The dress she chose was understated, navy with a graceful line at the collarbone. She caught me watching and smiled, the kind that begins privately before it reaches the mouth. Do I look all right? She asked. You look like the person I married, I said, and immediately wished I could cup the words and put them somewhere safe. Her eyes flickered, surprise, maybe grief, then softened. She took a step toward me, paused, and in that pause I felt the entire architecture of what we were about to do. Later, when the house had gone quiet, I double-checked everything. The hotkey, the backup, the letter addressed to the board, the envelope for Emily, sealed, waiting in my jacket pocket. I stood at the window and watched our streetlights paint the pavement in overlapping circles. Somewhere out there, the city went on believing in ordinary nights. I turned off the lamp. In the dark glass, my reflection hovered between rooms, part office, part hallway, belonging entirely to neither. The plan no longer felt like a plan. It felt like a tide. You don't choose a tide. You choose whether to stand in it or move. I chose. Tomorrow, the screen would tell the truth. And truth, once enlarged, does not shrink back to fit the life it came from. The ballroom of St. Joseph shimmered in the way expensive spaces do when people want to believe goodness has a budget. Chandeliers hummed, the stage lights sliced through perfume and nerves, and every conversation sounded half-scripted. I stood at the back of the room, headset looped around my neck, pretending to check audio levels. My heartbeat kept time with the metronome of the projector's cooling fan. Emily arrived beside me in navy silk, polite and unreadable. She smelled of mint and something floral. "You're working tonight?" she asked, her smile tight. "Just keeping an eye on the system," I said. "Should be smooth." She looked toward the stage where Dr. Ryan Cole mingled with donors. Laughter placed exactly where applause might land. Her gaze lingered a breath too long. Then she caught herself, fingers closing around her clutch like a confession. Megan sat near the front, posture immaculate. Our eyes met once, briefly, a silent handshake. The plan was already live. One keystroke waiting inside the rack. One hidden video cued between polished slides. I had checked the latency twice. The switch would be invisible. I felt both surgeon and patient, cutting and bleeding at the same time. The program began. Speeches, music, polite laughter. The MC read notes from the teleprompter, voice smooth with practiced sincerity. "And now," he said, "we celebrate innovation in neurological imaging, led by Dr. Ryan Cole, whose pioneering work has transformed patient care." Applause swelled. Cameras flashed. Ryan stepped to the podium, humility perfectly rehearsed. I tapped the hotkey. The screen blinked once, blue logo, fade, then black. For 3 seconds the audience held its breath, assuming a glitch. Then the image appeared, the MRI room, grayscale, timestamp glowing in the corner. The hum of the machine filled the speakers, steady as a pulse. 2 silhouettes entered. Their outlines were unmistakable, even blurred. No words, no sound but the click of the closing door. At first there was confusion. A ripple moved through the room, polite coughs turning into whispers. The MC froze, smile stiff. Someone near the front gasped. Megan looked straight ahead, expression neutral, as though she were simply watching a film whose ending she already knew. Emily's hand found my arm. "Daniel," she whispered, voice breaking on the second syllable. "Turn it off." I didn't move. The footage looped once, then faded to the hospital's crest and the words "compliance review pending." Applause had died completely. The only sound was the restless shuffle of chairs. Ryan stood motionless at the podium, color draining from his face. Security moved first, confused, whispering into earpieces. The board members whispered too, but their whispers carried power. Within minutes, the projection was cut, lights raised, the room bleeding, awkward light. The MC mumbled something about technical difficulties. It didn't matter. The damage was done. Emily turned toward me, eyes wide and wet. "What did you do?" she asked. I met her stare. "I told the truth," I said. "You just helped me film it." She stepped back as though the air itself had become sharp. "You don't understand," she began, but the sentence never found its end. Around us, people pretended to check their phones, desperate not to be witnesses. Ryan left through the side door, chased by security and silence. Megan stood slowly, smoothed her dress, and walked out through the main exit without looking back. Outside, the night smelled of rain and ozone. Reporters were already gathering near the entrance, their lenses hungry. Emily followed me into the parking lot, heels striking the pavement like punctuation. "You humiliated everyone," she said, her voice somewhere between fury and despair. "No," I said. "He humiliated himself. You just shared the scene." She looked at me as if measuring the distance between the man she married and the man who now spoke. "Do you feel better?" she asked. I thought about the drive, the hours of watching, the weight of every secret I had carried. I thought about how revenge never ends with applause, only with silence. "Not better," I said. "Just finished." She turned away, shoulders shaking, though I couldn't tell if it was from tears or anger. The rain started again, soft at first, then heavier, washing the evening into reflections on the asphalt. I watched her walk to her car, umbrella forgotten, hair darkening with every step. Inside, security sealed the hall. Someone disconnected the projector. The fan wound down like a dying breath. I slipped my headset into the case, feeling the weight of its coiled cord, a tether, a noose, both. When I stepped into the rain, Megan was waiting near the curb. She didn't smile. "It's done," she said. "Yes." "Does it help?" I shook my head. Truth never helps. It just ends the story. She nodded once, opened her umbrella, and disappeared into the streetlight haze. I stood there until the parking lot emptied. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the hospital's white facade, and for the first time in months, I felt something like quiet. Not peace, not forgiveness, just quiet. The kind that follows revelation, when everything that can break has already done so. Tomorrow, headlines would name him, maybe her. The board would investigate. Careers would collapse. And me, I would start learning how to live with the echo of my own choices. The next morning, the city seemed quieter, as if even the air had paused to listen to what had happened inside St. Joseph's Ballroom. News traveled faster than reason. Headlines with phrases like "scandal in the MRI room" and "doctor's affair exposed at charity gala." My inbox filled with notifications from colleagues asking if I was okay, pretending curiosity was concern. I turned the phone face down and let the messages vibrate themselves into silence. Emily hadn't come home that night. Her side of the bed remained untouched, pillow cold, the faint scent of her perfume lingering like unfinished conversation. Around noon, I heard the front door open. She stood there in the same navy dress from the gala, makeup smudged, hair damp from rain. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "You win," she said finally, voice hoarse. "Is that what you wanted?" I wanted to answer, but there wasn't a word in any language for what I felt. Something between victory and grief, pride twisted around loss. She stepped into the kitchen, poured water, stared at the glass like it might explain how we'd arrived here. "I never planned it," she said quietly. "It started as treatment." He listened. He made me feel seen. I let the words hang. He made me feel seen. The cruelest confession of all, because it meant I hadn't. "You could have told me," I said. You stopped asking. It was an accusation. It was anatomy. We stood in the autopsy of a marriage, both taking notes. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she continued. "And when I realized what I'd done, I didn't know how to stop without breaking everything." "You broke it anyway," I said. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "Then why did you have to make it public? Why not just walk away?" "Because walking away felt like pretending none of it happened. Because silence had already been my prison. Because revenge, for a moment, feels like proof that pain mattered." I didn't tell her any of that. I just said, "He hid behind white coats and clean words. You hid behind headaches. Someone had to turn on the lights." She exhaled, a sound half laugh, half sob. "Congratulations, Daniel. You turned on the lights. Now there's nothing left to see." She left the glass on the counter and walked out again, the door clicking shut like punctuation. The house felt larger instantly, and emptier. By afternoon, St. Joseph's issued a statement. Dr. Ryan Cole has been placed on indefinite administrative leave pending investigation. The board thanked donors for their continued faith in institutional integrity. I read the words twice. Institutional integrity. Two nouns trying to sound like redemption. Megan called later. "It's done," she said. "He's suspended. They'll revoke his license within weeks." "You sound satisfied." "I'm not," she said. "Just finished." The echo of my own earlier sentence struck me. Finished never means free. That night, I walked through the living room, past the couch where Emily used to fall asleep reading, past the framed photo from our wedding in Maine, her hair wind-tangled, my arm around her shoulders, both of us laughing at something forgotten. I took the picture down and set it face down on the shelf. The silence that followed wasn't anger, it was gravity. The next few days unfolded like aftermaths do. Emails, gossip, statements. The hospital's internal security requested my presence for clarification regarding digital infrastructure. They were polite, careful, afraid of liability. I told them the truth, that the footage had been stored in a redundant backup, that its discovery was accidental. They nodded, took notes, and pretended to believe. None asked why I had been at the gala in the first place. Everyone already knew. When I left the meeting, Megan was waiting by the elevators. "They'll bury it quietly," she said. "Hospitals always do." "As long as he's gone," I said. She looked at me for a moment, studying my face. "And what about her?" I didn't answer. There are kinds of punishment that don't require judges. We walked outside together. The wind carried the smell of disinfectant and wet asphalt. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Fix things," I said. It sounded naive even to me. "Be careful," she said. "Sometimes fixing turns into recreating the scene." Then she walked away, heels striking the pavement like a metronome counting down the end of everything. That evening, I sat in the dark with the footage playing one last time. Not for pleasure, not even for closure, just to make sure it still existed. I watched until I realized I wasn't looking at betrayal anymore. I was looking at absence, two people filling a void neither understood. I closed the file and dragged it to the encrypted drive. Then, after a long pause, I hit delete. The system asked for confirmation twice. I clicked yes both times. For the first time since it began, the house didn't feel haunted by screens. The hum of the refrigerator replaced the hum of the MRI. I sat there listening, waiting for guilt to settle. It didn't. It just hovered, thin and constant, like background radiation, proof that some things linger even after you erase them. The next morning, I mailed the letter I'd written weeks before, the one that began with "You built your world around a lie." No return address, just paper, ink, and the weight of what can't be unsent. 2 nights later, I dreamed of the MRI room. Empty, lights low, the machine silent. I walked inside, lay down on the cold table, and pressed the start button. The magnet hummed to life, a deep mechanical heartbeat that shook the air. But instead of noise, there was a voice, mine, whispering from the intercom. "You wanted to see inside, didn't you?" I woke with the sound still in my ears, heart hammering, the echo fading into the early morning dark. Outside, rain tapped the windows again, steady and patient. Somewhere, the world was already moving on. I wasn't sure if I wanted to follow. St. Joseph's asked me back for a formal debrief. The conference room was small, windowless, chilled a few degrees too low. A pitcher of water sweated on a tray beside a stack of non-disclosure forms. 2 people waited, the hospital counsel, neat as a ledger, and a compliance officer whose pen never stopped moving. They thanked me for assistance, then asked me to confirm the mechanics of the backup I'd configured. I explained the redundancy, the mirrored cache, the retention window. I kept my voice even, hands folded, a technician describing a storm he did not cause. When I finished, counsel tapped a key and turned the monitor toward me. "There's something else," she said, careful, like carrying glass. The screen brightened to the grayscale of an empty MRI room. Timestamp, nearly a year ago. The door opened. A pair entered, laughing softly, shoulders close. I knew my own stride before I knew my own face. It was me. Me in scrubs, badge clipped to a pocket, hair longer by an inch, posture looser by a life. The woman with me was Laura, radiology nurse. Quick smile, quicker jokes in the break room too late at night. We were framed by that familiar halo, the magnet looming like a moon. Laura's hand brushed my sleeve. I saw myself lean toward her, not quite cautious enough. The camera caught a hesitation, then something like gravity making a choice. I didn't breathe. The counsel didn't speak. The room filled with the sound of the machine idling, a mechanical ocean I suddenly remembered in my bones. On the video, Laura tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked up at me with that same sideways spark that had once felt like oxygen after a long tunnel. My hand came up, reflex, habit, hunger, whatever honest name it deserves, and the screen froze. "We recovered this during review," counsel said, voice neutral. "Different timestamp, different personnel, same room." "How did you?" I started then stopped. The question was useless. The better one was, how had I filed this away inside myself so efficiently that I could hold outrage without seeing the mirror behind it? "We're not interested in punishing contractors," the compliance officer added, still writing. But we need to understand patterns of after-hours use. Patterns. The word landed like an indictment written by a machine. I signed what they put in front of me. I agreed to nothing more than truth. When they finally let me go, the hall felt longer than usual, like the building had stretched while I was inside. I walked past the vending machines, past the bulletin board where committee minutes curled at the corners, past the door to radiology B where Laura had once leaned and whispered, "You work too much, Daniel." I had smiled then, stupid and flattered, warmed by being seen. I had told myself it was a moment, unimportant, contained. The camera disagreed. Outside, the air was bright and cold. I called Emily. She answered on the second ring, silence heavy between our names. "Can we talk?" I asked. She came by at dusk. No makeup, hair pulled back, a hoodie of mine she hadn't returned. She stood at the kitchen island, fingers tracing the edge like it could steady her. "Did they show you?" she asked. I swallowed. "Yes." Her eyes shone, not triumphant, not cruel, just tired. "I saw it months ago," she said. "I was in radiology waiting for you to finish a job. The admin left a display on. Your shadow moved across the glass, and I knew the way I know your walk in a crowd." She stopped, breath shivering. I didn't want it to be what it looked like, but it was. And once you've seen the outline, your mind fills the rest. The room tilted. "Why didn't you say anything?" She laughed without humor. "Because you would have called it nothing. You would have told me I was imagining it, or that it was a mistake, or that it didn't matter. And maybe you would have believed yourself. Maybe you still do." She lifted her chin, eyes steady. "So I did what you did. I chose a moment and told myself it would not define me. Until it did. I didn't. I started, then let the sentence die. Defenses are just synonyms for delay." She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the trace of soap on her wrist. The nearness punched through months of distance. My body betrayed me with memory. The curve of her shoulder, the familiar warmth where collar meets throat. Attraction isn't a verdict. It's a ghost that refuses to leave the house. She saw it flicker in my eyes and looked away, as if the heat itself could burn her again. "I tried to come back to us," she said. "I tried to talk to you about the migraines, about the way the house had gone quiet, about how your screens were always between us." You nodded and hugged me, and then returned to your keyboard. Ryan wasn't a plan. He was a door I opened because the room felt airless. "And the gala?" I asked, softer than I meant. "Did it feel like air?" "It felt like drowning in a crowd," she said. "A punishment with witnesses." We stood there, two juries with one defendant and no judge. I thought of Laura's laugh, quick and light, of the coffee we shared at 1 a.m., hospital humming around us, of a kiss that should have been a warning flare and instead became a secret I pretended was benign. I thought of Emily's ring catching moonlight as she slept, the way she leaned toward me even after we'd begun to drift. I thought of the camera that had seen all of it and asked for none of it. "I'm sorry," I said finally. Not as strategy, not as barter, just as the truest sentence I have left. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted, less anger, more weathered distance. "I believe you," she said, "and I don't know what to do with that." We didn't touch. The air between us felt like a bridge missing its middle. Outside, a siren wound passed, then faded. Inside, the refrigerator clicked on, a small domestic engine that suddenly sounded like an oath to continue. "Will you stay tonight?" I asked, immediately unsure if it was kindness or cowardice. "No," she said gently. "Not yet. Maybe not again." She picked up her keys, hesitated, then placed them back down, like she couldn't decide which part of leaving should come first. "I didn't stop loving you, Daniel. I stopped finding us. There's a difference." At the door, she paused. "When they called you in today," she said, "I knew what they would show you. I almost texted first. I didn't. Maybe I wanted the room to tell you because I couldn't anymore." After she left, I sat on the floor and watched the light from the street spill across the hallway in slow rectangles. The board had its pattern, we had ours. The difference was only who got to label it. I opened the encrypted drive and hovered over the folder labeled proof. I didn't delete it this time, and I didn't catalog it either. I renamed it History and closed the lid. In the dark, the house felt less like a crime scene and more like a waiting room. Some scans find tumors. Some find scar tissue. Some find nothing and still change how you live. I lay back, the hardwood cool against my spine, and pictured the MRI bore as a doorway you pass through to learn what kind of story your body has been telling without asking permission. The machine doesn't lie. It doesn't forgive, either. It just shows you what you brought into it. Tomorrow, I would go back to the hospital one last time. Not to fix their servers. To lie down in that room and listen to the magnet sing, and ask whatever was left of my life if it wanted to stay. The MRI suite looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the absence of people. No technicians, no laughter, no half-lit hum of duty pretending to be purpose. The walls smelled faintly of ozone and detergent. I had signed the visitor waiver, explaining that I wanted to test acoustic resonance drift. The clerk didn't question it. People rarely doubt the quiet ones who speak the language of machines. I slipped off my watch, keys, phone. Metal-free, clean as confession. The table's vinyl was cold against my back. Above me, the white ring of the bore glowed with soft light, like a halo built by engineers. I pressed start on the control pad and listened as the magnet began its slow crescendo, deep, rhythmic, mechanical breathing. The same sound that had once betrayed my world now filled it again, steady and impersonal. Images flickered across memory as the pulse intensified. Emily's first migraine, her laughter at the galley years before, Laura's quick smile in a hallway, Megan's calm precision, Ryan's collapse under fluorescent truth. Each frame layered over the next until they formed a collage of everything I had been. Husband, lover, judge, witness, ghost. The noise of the scanner merged with my heartbeat until I couldn't tell which was which. When the sequence ended, the room fell into stillness. On the monitor, a new series of cross-sections appeared, my brain sliced into delicate grays, beautiful in their objectivity. The technician on duty peeked through the glass. "All done?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just wanted to see something." What I wanted was proof that there was still a center inside me untouched by all this circuitry of betrayal. The images gave no answer. Machines can find density, not meaning. Outside, dawn burned low over the city. I drove aimlessly until I reached the harbor, parking where the water met the concrete like a cracked mirror. Seagulls screamed above the waves. Their sound was both ugly and pure. I opened the envelope of prints, my scan results, clean, unremarkable. Healthy brain, normal function. A perfect picture of damage that doesn't register. My phone buzzed once. A message from Emily. "I'm leaving for Portland for a while. Don't worry about me." Beneath it, a second line. "Thank you for finally telling the truth, even if it hurt." I typed a dozen replies, erased each, then settled on "take care of yourself." It looked like closure, though it was only punctuation. Weeks passed. Ryan's license was suspended. Megan filed for divorce quietly, efficiently. The hospital repaired its image with press releases and donations. My contract ended by mutual agreement. The world moved on as it always does, forward, indifferent, precise. I started freelancing again, smaller jobs, simpler systems. The work felt honest in its way. Plug cables, restore order, leave nothing personal behind. At night, I walked by the river. Sometimes I imagined Emily beside me, the way she used to wrap her arms around herself when the wind picked up. Sometimes I imagined nothing at all, and that was better. One evening, I found an old thumb drive at the back of a drawer, the one labeled history. I hesitated, then plugged it in. Only one file remained, a single frame from the MRI feed. Not the scandal, not the faces, just the empty room, lights spilling through the observation window. I stared at it for a long time. Absence, rendered perfect. I saved the image under a new name, Peace. JPG. Then I deleted the drive's contents and watched the progress bar crawl toward zero. Months later, I visited the hospital one last time to return a borrowed toolkit. The receptionist didn't recognize me. "Maintenance request?" she asked. "Just dropping something off," I said. As I turned to leave, a young couple passed through the lobby, her hand resting lightly on his arm, nervous and affectionate. They headed toward radiology. The woman laughed, and the sound, clear, ordinary, caught me off guard. It wasn't Emily's laugh, but it carried the same ease of someone still believing life could be fixed with honesty. I stepped outside into the spring air. For the first time, I didn't feel like watching anything anymore. I didn't need footage. I had memory, and memory, at least, belongs to the living. That night, I wrote one final note and placed it on the desk beside the old headset. To whoever repairs these systems after me, remember that cameras only show what's in front of them. The real failures happen behind the glass. I signed it D.R. and left it there. When I switched off the light, the room reflected a faint outline of me in the window. Nothing sharp, just a silhouette merging with the city glow. I watched until it dissolved completely. Somewhere below, the hum of power lines and traffic blended into a low, steady rhythm, mechanical yet almost human. For the first time in a long while, I let that sound carry me to sleep.